The smell of lilies filled the room, thick, sweet, suffocating. It always amazed me how flowers could both honor the dead and remind the living of what they'd lost. I stood near the casket, alone, gripping the edge like it could anchor me to something real. My hand shook, not from grief, at least not the kind most people understood. This wasn't the grief of losing someone beloved. It was the ache of losing someone you never truly had. My mother lay inside, still and cold, with her lips pressed into that familiar line, the same one she wore when she left me at that orphanage on a rainy Thursday in 1967. I was 8 years old, clutching a brown paper bag of clothes and a note that said, "He's better off." I never saw her again, not until today, not until her funeral. For 43 years, I carried the weight of her absence like a stone in my chest. I built my life around it, shaped my anger, my doubts, even my successes around that single gaping wound. I told myself I didn't need her. I convinced myself I didn't care. But standing there, breathing in the scent of lilies and loss, something inside me cracked. Not because she was gone, but because I still wanted to hear her voice. I must have been around 7, maybe 8. The house was unusually quiet that morning, and I remember it because it wasn't our kind of quiet. It was wrong. The air didn't hum with the sound of my mother humming in the kitchen, or the radio playing old soul songs. There was no clatter of dishes, no smell of coffee, just silence. I walked into the kitchen barefoot. The floor was cold. The chair where she usually sat was empty. Her cup, still half full, sat on the table. Black coffee, no cream. She always drank it like that. Something was off. Even at that age, I could feel it. Then I noticed the envelope. It was sitting on the counter, just beside the toaster. My name was scribbled in cursive. "To my son," it read. I didn't open it right away. I didn't need to. Because the door to her room was wide open, and her closet empty. Her suitcases gone. She had left. I ran outside. My feet hit the gravel hard and fast. I scanned the street like maybe I'd see her down the block, waving back at me, smiling. But there was no one, just the wind and the rustle of dry leaves. When my father came home that night, he didn't say a word. He saw the note crumpled in my small hand. He just sat down beside me on the porch steps. We didn't speak. We just sat in the dying light of that day, our shadows stretching long across the lawn. She never came back. Not for birthdays. Not for Christmas. Not even when I broke my leg in high school and spent a week in the hospital. She was just gone. I didn't cry at first. I think part of me didn't understand it. The other part refused to believe it. Kids think their parents are permanent, like the sun. But the day she left, it was like the sun had disappeared, and no one told me it might not come back. I learned to fold that pain. Fold it like a letter you never want to read again. Tuck it in a corner of your soul and pretend it's not there. But it was always there, waiting. Waiting for a day like this one. A funeral. A cold room full of flowers and regrets. I used to write her letters, not to send them, just to survive. They were tucked inside an old notebook, bought from a drugstore, torn around the edges, smelling faintly of old wood and coffee. I kept it under my bed. It was the only place in that house that felt like mine. I must have written 100 letters. Some were angry, furious even. Others were like whispered prayers, pages soaked in silent tears, confessions I couldn't say aloud, hopes I didn't dare to keep alive. In one letter, I told her I hated her, that she had ruined my childhood, that every birthday, every Christmas without her was like a punch to the chest. I remember the exact words I wrote. You left me with an ache no one else sees. You gave me life, then walked away from it. In another, I wrote how I missed her, how every time I saw a woman in the grocery store buying cereal with her son, I looked away. I didn't want them to see my envy. And once, just once, I tried to write her a letter of forgiveness. But I couldn't finish it. I tore the page out, crumpled it, threw it away. It felt like forgiving her meant betraying myself. How do you forgive a ghost? I didn't bring the notebook to the funeral. But I remembered the words. All of them. I stood there in front of her casket, hands trembling. My heart wasn't pounding. It was quiet. Too quiet. Like the moment before a storm, or the second before a scream. And in my head, I read her that last unfinished letter, the one I never had the courage to complete. I don't know if you ever loved me. I don't know if you tried and just couldn't. But I know this. I'm tired of carrying this pain. I'm tired of hating someone I used to beg for in my dreams. So here it is, my truth. You hurt me. But I don't want that to be the only story left between us. That was the beginning of forgiveness. Not a grand gesture, not a moment of peace. Just a crack in the wall, a single breath, a beginning. High, measured, as if speaking to someone long gone, yet still present in memory. A weight of unspoken years rests in the voice. I never got to say what I wanted to say when you were alive, Mom. I had all these words in my heart, but they got stuck behind old walls. Walls made of silence and pride, built brick by brick from every birthday you missed, every report card you never saw, every night I waited for a knock that never came. So, I wrote you a letter once. Not to mail, not really, just to unburden my soul.
I kept it in the drawer of my desk for nearly 15 years. The paper yellowed, the ink smudged from a tear I didn't admit I shed. I found it the night you died. I sat on the floor, reading every line aloud, as if maybe your spirit was hovering nearby, finally willing to listen. It started like this. Dear Mom, there's a boy inside me still waiting for you to come home. He stands at the window every day after school. Sometimes he hates you. Sometimes he imagines you're in the hospital or lost in another city and can't find your way back. But mostly, he just waits. He wants to know why he wasn't enough. Love, your son. Yeah, that was the truth I never sent. Funny how the soul hangs on to old drafts, not just on paper, but in the heart. But I also realize now that little boy, he grew up. And today, here, beside your casket, he's ready to let that letter go. Not because he no longer cares, but because he's tired of carrying the silence. Because letting go doesn't mean it didn't matter. It just means I choose not to let the pain own me anymore. You left without answers, but I stay with peace. They told me your last words were, "Tell him I'm sorry." 3 words, that's all. And yet, they echoed louder than all the years of silence between us. Tell him I'm sorry. I don't know who you said them to. A nurse? A priest? A stranger who just happened to be holding your hand? But those words traveled through time and pain like a miracle. They reached me when I didn't even know I needed to hear them. And the moment I heard them, I cried. Not because they fixed everything, but because for the first time in my life, I heard you speak the truth. Mom, if you were here, I'd say this. I forgive you. I forgive you for leaving, for not knowing how to love me in the ways I needed, for the birthdays missed and the arms I needed around me when the world fell apart. I forgive you not because you asked, but because holding on to anger kept me tied to the worst version of myself. Forgiveness. It's not a gift I give you. It's a freedom I give myself. And maybe, just maybe, it's what your soul was waiting for too. So go now, Mom. Rest easy. You're forgiven. The funeral ended. People left, one by one, their footsteps fading into the stillness. I stayed behind. I stood by the casket a long time, longer than anyone else, longer than the weight of our history should have allowed. Because this wasn't just a goodbye to you. It was a goodbye to the little boy in me who kept hoping you'd come back. I brought something with me that day, a photograph. It was the only picture I had of us together. I was maybe 6. You had your arms around me. We were both smiling. I don't remember the moment, but I held on to the image like a piece of proof that once we belonged to each other. I placed the photo inside your casket, not as a tribute, but as a release. I gave that little boy permission to stop waiting, to stop wondering if he wasn't enough. I let him know it wasn't his fault. It was never his fault. That was the moment I let you go. There was a letter I wrote once. I never mailed it. never showed it to anyone. It was meant for her, Mom. I wrote it after I found out she had cancer. I remember sitting alone in my study, the rain outside tapping the window like a soft metronome of regret. In that letter, I told her everything. The nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering what I'd done to deserve being abandoned. The birthdays I spent staring at the door, hoping maybe, just maybe, she'd appear. The shame I carried when the other kids asked why I didn't have a mom around. I wrote it all down, every wound, every scar. And then I forgave her. Not because she earned it, but because I needed peace. Because holding on to the pain was like swallowing poison and expecting it to hurt her. It only hurt me. So I folded the letter, slipped it into the back of my journal, and I left it there. Maybe I thought one day I'd give it to her. But I never did. Because, in truth, it wasn't for her. It was for me. And now, standing here at her funeral, I realize I didn't need to say the words aloud. Because forgiveness doesn't require an audience. It just needs a willing heart. That letter, it was the first time I let go of being her son and started becoming my own man.
A few days after the funeral, I was cleaning out her things. Old scarves, faded perfume bottles, piles of unopened mail. Then I found it, tucked inside a worn-out Bible, a photograph. It was me, 5 years old, gap-toothed, wearing a crooked little paper crown I must have made in kindergarten. She had kept it all these years. Despite everything, she kept it. And on the back, in her familiar cursive handwriting, she wrote, "My sunshine, forgive me." I stared at it for a long time. My throat clenched. I sat down on her bed, and for the first time since the funeral, I wept. Not for the mother I never had, but for the mother I now realized had always carried a wound too deep to show. She was broken too, and maybe she didn't know how to be a mom, but she remembered me. She loved me, in her way. Maybe she just didn't know how to show it. That photo is still with me, framed on my bookshelf, not as a memory of what I lost, but of what I found, too late to say aloud.
A week later, almost a whisper at first, then slowly full of gravity. A week later, I had a dream. I was back in our old house. The kitchen light flickered, same as always. I was sitting at the table, knees too big now for that tiny chair from childhood. And across from me, she was there, my mother. But not the frail woman from the hospital. She was younger, stronger, the version I barely remembered, if at all. She looked at me with those tired eyes and said nothing, only reached out and placed her hand over mine. It was warm, real, and I felt in that moment something I had chased my whole life, a kind of peace, a kind of knowing. Then she whispered, I see you now. I always did. I woke up, tears streaming down my face, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was release. All the bitterness, all the questions, all the years I thought she never loved me, they didn't vanish, but they softened, like mist breaking in morning light. Maybe forgiveness isn't a gift you give the other person. Maybe it's the gift you give yourself, to stop carrying the weight of what they couldn't say. And maybe, just maybe, they were always loving you in the only way they knew how.
I returned to the cemetery one last time. The air was still. Leaves whispered like they knew something I didn't. I stood at her grave. No flowers this time, just me. I placed my hand on the cold stone and whispered, "Goodbye, Mom." But it wasn't the kind of goodbye that came from grief. It was the kind that comes from understanding, from finally letting go. I didn't need her to apologize anymore. I didn't need the answers I used to beg for, because I had found them in myself. I turned to walk away, and for the first time in years, my steps felt light. Like I wasn't walking away from her, but walking toward something, toward peace, toward healing, toward the life I deserved to live, not defined by what I lacked, but shaped by what I've learned. I am not just the boy she left behind. I am the man who chose to forgive, who faced the pain and found purpose in it, who walked into the storm and came out whole. Mom never said I'm sorry, but in some strange, sacred way, her silence taught me everything. And maybe that's enough. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly. This wasn't just a story about my mother. It was a story about all of us, about pain, forgiveness, and the quiet strength it takes to choose peace over bitterness. Maybe you've carried your own wounds. Maybe you've said goodbye to someone without ever getting the closure you needed. If so, I see you. You're not alone. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending everything was okay. It means choosing to no longer let the pain define you, to write your own ending with compassion, with courage, and with grace. If this story stirred something in you, please consider leaving a comment below. Tell me your story. Tell someone you trust, or simply write it out for yourself. Let it go, or begin to. And if you believe stories like this matter, stories about real hearts, real healing, please support this channel. You can do that by liking this video, subscribing for more, sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere out there, someone is holding on to pain they've never spoken out loud. Maybe your share becomes their first step towards peace. Until next time, take care of your heart, and thank you for listening.